The Book of Boba Fett is streaming all 7 episodes on Disney Plus now, and I thought it was... It really pains me to say this, but this show was overall just disappointing. I never feel like writing a script, editing a video, and uploading it unless I'm passionate about something, but this time I am, because once again, I have been let down by Star Wars. Not as bad as The Rise of Skywalker, though. I stand by everything I said in that video 2 years ago. It is the worst thing I've ever seen. But we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about... The Book of Boba Fett is a spin-off of The Mandalorian and follows Tamara Morrison as Boba Fett and Ming-Na Wen as Fennec Shand. The show picks up where the post-credit scene of The Mandalorian Season 2 finale left off and follows the duo trying to stake their claim on Jabba the Hutt's old territory and run a crime family. At least that's what the showrunners tell us it's about, but after watching all 7 episodes, I'm personally not convinced. I don't even think this show knows what it's about. Not counting Daniel Logan's portrayal of a young Boba Fett in the prequels or his subsequent portrayals in the Clone Wars, fans have been waiting since 1983 to see Boba Fett return to the screen and kick some ass. Now, it's worth keeping in mind that since it's been so long, there is no way in hell this show could have lived up to the adventures and stories that fans created in their minds for decades, but the show could have still been far better than what we got. This is your one and only spoiler warning. I will be talking about the entire series and I am not going to restrain myself from talking about spoilers. So let's talk about what we got, and let's start at the beginning. I have to say that as a whole, this premiere felt very underwhelming. When I first watched it though, I was overwhelmed with nostalgia and satisfaction after seeing Boba Fett climb out of the Sarlacc pit after all this time in the same manner that was predicted by Patton Oswalt on Parks and Recreation.
Pan down from the twin suns of Tatooine, we are now close on the mouth of the Sarlacc pit. After a beat, the gloved Mandalorian armor gauntlet of Boba Fett grabs onto the sand outside the Sarlacc pit, and the feared bounty hunter pulls himself from the maw of the sand beast.
Okay, this is exactly...
And we realize that he survived his fall during the battle at Jabba's palace ship.
I really like seeing Tamara Morrison in Boba Fett's original trilogy armor, even though he's covered in acid for one sequence and then he's covered in sand for another. Now, I'm not saying that this episode was bad. It's certainly not the worst of the series, but I feel like a series premiere has to really captivate the audience, especially the casual viewers. Because let's be honest, not everyone gives a shit about Boba Fett. A lot of people don't even know why this series exists and don't care about Star Wars except for The Mandalorian. So you have to convince them visually and narratively that this story has a purpose. When I first watched this and I got over all the nostalgia, I just felt underwhelmed. I remember not being impressed at all with the action when I first watched this, but after watching the whole series, I can say that this is definitely not the worst action choreography. Except there's this one part that I can't get past, and that's the fact that Boba and Fennec get surrounded by mercenaries with big red shields and they let them kick their ass. Oh no, we're surrounded, how will we ever get out? Well, I don't know, dude, maybe use your jetpack? Fennec tries to do a high jump over the shields when Boba Fett can literally fucking fly, for crying out loud. But it's whatever, the showrunners really want to show us a lot of flashbacks, and the only way they can give us flashbacks is to have Boba Fett in the Bacta-pod so that he can start remembering shit, I guess. And because of this, the script demands that Boba Fett get his ass kicked. Overall, this episode just isn't that impressive and certainly didn't impress me as a series premiere. But I will admit, the first episode is far too soon to judge a show. Chapter 2 is actually pretty good. I was thoroughly impressed with this episode and thought it was a major improvement from the series premiere. After I watched this episode, I even said that I thought this series could have benefited from a 2-episode drop on the first week like some shows do on Disney+. We get more of this female Tusken warrior, and she's definitely one of my favorite side characters, even though we have no clue what she's saying. I'm not even annoyed that the majority of this episode is a flashback, because that's actually the best part. My only real complaint about this episode is that Boba and Fennec keep strolling into town and visiting the mayor and Garsa's sanctuary repeatedly. If you were annoyed that another Star Wars IP is taking place on Tatooine, be prepared to be annoyed further because this show just loves staying in the same places, most of the time, but we'll get to that later. I never once in my life asked to see Jabba the Hutt's cousins, but I'm not complaining that we get to see them. There's an actual story to tell there in the power vacuum that Jabba left behind, and this episode had me fooled that the Hutts were coming back to stake their claim in Jabba's territory as the show's antagonists. But as we will soon find out, they're not the antagonists and have virtually no bearing on the story. But hey, this sequence gave us Black Chrysanthemum Twins transition from comics to live action, so that's pretty neat. One thing I will say though is that Boba Fett talks a hell of a lot in this show, and even Tamura Morrison has spoken about how he tried passing off some lines to Ming-Na Wen because he thought he was talking too much. Well, I think all of us who said that might have spoken a little too soon. So the rest of this episode is a flashback, and like I said, I'm not complaining. It's in this flashback that we are introduced to the show's actual antagonists, the Pike Syndicate, who we previously saw in the Clone Wars and in Solo. We get a heaping dose of fan service when Boba Fett walks to Tosche Station to beat up some bikers. And yes, this is the same Tosche Station that Luke said he had to go to pick up some power converters in A New Hope.
But I was going into Tosche Station to pick up some power converters.
There's deleted scenes from A New Hope that take place in Tosche Station, which this set was modeled after, and it's really nice to see. The two bystanders that get picked on by the bikers are actually from those deleted scenes too. They're Luke's friends Cammy and Fixer. While many say that Boba is soft in this show, this is a sequence that feels more on par with the brutality of The Mandalorian. This episode also gives us arguably the most iconic line in the entire series.
Like a panther. Yes?
Boba Fett's interactions with the Tuskens in this episode is fun to watch, and I will give the writers credit for actually fleshing out this part of Boba's backstory for the new age of his character. He teaches them to ride the speeder bikes and they rob a train that the Pikes are using to transport spice. Where the last episode didn't impress me with the action, this one just doesn't miss. I mean, look at this. It's obvious that the showrunners want to make Boba Fett into a more honorable anti-hero and have him distance himself from his violent and vengeful past, and sure, that can work, but I just don't think that translates well into the character in the present day. But then we get to see what I thought was one of the best sequences in the show, and that of course is Boba Fett tripping balls in the Tatooine desert, and no, I'm not kidding, this sequence really stood out to me, and I was thoroughly impressed. We're already getting a lot of world building with the Tuskens and their culture, and suddenly Boba Fett is given what is essentially psychedelics in the form of a lizard up his nose, and he wanders off into the desert to have a spiritual journey. This sequence was visually and even emotionally moving, and I remember feeling, okay, yeah, this show could definitely work. Give me more of that. After watching this episode, I was convinced that this series really could have benefited from a 2-episode drop on the first week like I already said. But nonetheless, I was super excited for next week's episode. Chapter 3 is fucking boring. I think everyone agrees this episode is the weakest of the series, and it's not hard to see why. This episode was directed by Robert Rodriguez, and it's not the only episode that he directed in this series, and it suffers in part because of him. I have no clue how much creative control that he had over stuff like set pieces and designs, but so much of it just feels wrong and out of place, and if you've seen the show, you already know what I'm talking about. So Boba Fett gets asked by Milton from Office Space to deal with these meddling kids who are stealing from his inventory, which is water. The dude sells water. This sequence is fucking hilarious, and not even on purpose, because Milton from Office Space tells Boba Fett that nobody respects him, and it sounds like the audience talking through the TV. Boba Fett finds the teenagers, and they tell him that there's no work for them in the workers' district, so he just says, okay, you're gonna work for me then. Why Boba Fett even wants these cyberpunk, Power Ranger, Spy Kids, Inspector Gadget-esque looking motherfuckers on his team is beyond me, or why the showrunners couldn't have just written more interesting characters to be utilized here is also beyond me. These kids ride around on bright and colorful space Vespas, and it just didn't feel like it belonged in Star Wars, especially Tatooine. I don't know who was in charge of these designs, but whoever it is, have they ever seen Star Wars? This is a shot from the same episode and it looks just fucking ridiculous. In a back-to-pod flashback, we see the Tuskens that Boba was with were slaughtered, and the trademark of the Nikto speed bikers that he beat up and robbed in the last episode is left in the village. The flashback ends and the back-to-pod opens, and we're treated to Black Chrysanthemum's first fight sequence in live action, baby! Let's fucking go! It sucks. Thanks, Robert Rodriguez. So Chrysanthemum throws Boba Fett around like he's Frank Reynolds covered in hand sanitizer.
Guys are all over the floor. What's in here? Oh!
Frank?
Oh my God.
What the hell did you do to yourself?
I just want to be pure.
And then he's literally breaking his back while Sophie Thatcher just walks up to him and stabs him. And then the rest of the cyberpunk kids run in to fight Chrysanthemum. This doesn't suck just because of the directing. It's all the more stupid when later on we're told directly by Jabba's cousins that they sent Chrysanthemum to kill him. Boba Fett was asleep in a bactopod with literally nobody around him, and Chrysanthemum, a trained killer, decides his best move is to open the tank and throw him around the room. But anyways, the Hutts tell Boba Fett they don't give a shit about Tatooine anymore or Jabba's old territory. They tell him that the Mayor Shai's promised the territory to another syndicate, and they don't want war. They give Boba his own Rancor for some reason, and they tell him that they don't even want Chrysanthemum back. So he takes the Rancor and frees Chrysanthemum, who just jogs off into the desert. Honestly, this is like the funniest scene in the episode. This episode treats us to Danny Trejo in Star Wars finally, which I guess is the only positive about Rodriguez directing Star Wars. Boba Fett says he wants to ride the Rancor, and it's very obvious it'll come into play later on in the series. They decide to visit the mayor once again to inquire about the claim that he promised the territory to another syndicate, but they soon find out the mayor already ditched town, and his Twi'lek aide tries to ditch town too. But thankfully for Boba and crew, the speeder he's driving is so painfully fucking slow. I cannot remember the last time I was bored by Star Wars. Like, I thought it was impossible because I love this shit. But this? I don't even know what this is. The footage you're watching play in the background has not been slowed down at all. That's how it was shot. This feels like kiddie TV filler garbage, and I was just waiting for the sequence to end. After it ended, I felt like this.
Okay. That shit was ass.
This episode sparked so much backlash that Ming-Na Wen came out and spoke openly about how she understands these feelings and emotions, but that she thinks and hopes that people will look at the series differently after the show's finale. I feel really bad because actors involved shouldn't have to come out mid-season and say, guys, I'm sorry, just please give the show a chance. But regardless, this episode killed off a lot of excitement I had for the rest of the episodes, because I just assumed this would be more subpar filler. Chapter 4 is alright for the most part. We start with a flashback that had an unannounced time skip, considering the first flashback takes place during Return of the Jedi after the battle over the Dune Sea, and we're now caught up to what Boba Fett was doing during the first season of The Mandalorian, which takes place 5 years after Return of the Jedi. We watch as Boba Fett finds Fennec Shan left for dead at the end of The Mandalorian Season 1 Episode 5, and he takes her to Thundercat to get mechanical guts. The interaction between Fennec and Boba might bore some people, but I believe it strengthens the story that I think the writers are trying to tell. This flashback is just about Boba Fett trying to get Fennec's help to retrieve his ship from the hangar in Jabba's palace. All the right-wing reactionaries on YouTube that cover pop culture lost their collective shit when Boba Fett told Fennec that he wanted her help recovering his fire spray gunship because apparently this line of dialogue is evidence of Disney selling out to the woke SJW leftist mob. Now, I don't want to linger on this issue, but I want to clarify for anyone out of the loop or for anyone who actually watches those soul-sucking incel channels that the model of his ship is a fire spray. The name of the ship is still Slave 1, but from the looks of it, they're not going to refer to it as Slave 1 anymore. Even then, Fennec Shan wouldn't know what the hell a Slave 1 is, but I'm sure she knows what a fire spray is, since it's the name of a ship model rather than the personal name given to the ship. The conversation that they have together about Boba's plan to take out Bib Fortuna and take over Jabba's old territory would have served more useful for the story and for the audience to be seen earlier in the show, in my opinion. We're 4 episodes in and just now seeing how Boba Fett saved Fennec and how their team up started. And while we're on the topic of Fennec, I just want to say how disappointed I am in how she was written. She has really no character whatsoever, and it's sad to see. She stands at Boba's side and makes threats on his behalf, fights and shoots people, and does some cool stunts, but that's really it. We have no clue what her motivations are, and as a result, I actually thought she would betray Boba Fett, because this show hasn't given me a reason to believe that she is only loyal to him other than the fact that it's currently the best deal she has, leaving her open to turn on him if a better deal presents itself. Once Boba Fett recovers his ship, we get the best sequence of the episode, where Boba Fett enacts his revenge against the Nicta speedbikers for massacring his Tusken tribe. This sequence is well shot and just had me grinning the whole time. In the present day, we hear Boba Fett being told that he's completely healed, which is the script's way of saying, okay guys, there's no more flashbacks, no more back to soaking, we're done. There's now 3 episodes left that could completely focus on Boba's story in the present day. So it'd be a real shame if any of the remaining episodes deviated from Boba Fett's story entirely. After all, this is the Book of Boba Fett, so it's not like they'd sideline the titular character. But anyways, I'm getting ahead of myself. At Garsa's sanctuary, Chrysanthemum has one too many drinks and gets riled up watching Trandoshans having fun gambling, so he decides to beat the shit out of them. For those unaware, Wookiees and Trandoshans hate each other, and Trandoshans hunt Wookiees for sport. This scene came out of nowhere, so I honestly thought they were establishing the conflict between the two species for the casual audiences because later on we might be introduced to a more famous Trandoshan bounty hunter. But no. He's not in this show. In the present day, Boba Fett calls a meeting with all the crime families to have dinner and discuss business, where he asks them to join him in his fight against the Pike Syndicate. One of them raises a point that this isn't their fight and that the Pikes have only threatened Boba's territory, while they actually profit from the Pikes moving spice through Tatooine. Boba Fett realizes deep down they have a point, so he just asks them politely to remain neutral if the Pikes ask them to betray him, and so they agree. Fennec and Boba watch them leave the palace and talk about preparations for war with the Pikes, to which Boba says he has a lot of money, but not not a lot of muscle. Fennec tells Boba that credits can buy muscle if you know where to look, which, yeah? No shit? Why would Boba Fett not know that? Sure, he's never run a gacha before, but I'm more than certain that Boba Fett knows that you can pay people to fight for you. That seems like a given. Anyways, once she says this, we hear the now iconic sound of the Mandalorian's theme to give us a tease of the next episode, which would no doubt feature the return of the Mandalorian to come help Boba in his fight. Chapter 5 is literally just The Mandalorian Season 2.5. This episode got everyone talking because, as the title suggests, it features the return of Din Djarin the Mandalorian. In this episode of the Book of Boba Fett, do you know who's not featured? Boba Fett. The titular character is not in this episode at all. This episode is directed by Bryce Dallas Howard, and let me just say that she deserves the world and more chances to direct Star Wars. She just gets it. This entire episode follows Din Djarin as he tracks down a bounty, uses the Darksaber and hurts himself with it because he's not trained with it, learns more about the Mandalorian lore and the Darksaber's history, gets kicked out of his little cult because he took his helmet off twice, and then hitches a ride to Tatooine to get a new ship. By all means, this episode is phenomenal. If I had to pick which episode of the show is the best, it's a toss-up between this episode and the next, which I will get to later, of course. But just speaking in the confines of weekly release dates, this was without a doubt the best episode to date when it dropped. But what does that say about the Book of Boba Fett when the best episode doesn't even have Boba Fett in it? As general Star Wars content, I won't complain because this episode is stellar. I genuinely don't think I have any negative thing to say about it, aside from my overall criticism that this is a huge diversion from Boba Fett's story. But in the moment, I still excused it because I thought, okay, this is just one episode where we focus on Mando, so there's still 2 episodes left. Like I said, this episode is just really great. There's fan service galore, from finally seeing the Night of a Thousand Tears in live action, seeing a droid that I assume is not supposed to be the BD-1 from Jedi Fallen Order, to Mando's new ship being a repurposed N1 starfighter that we last saw in 1999, and then him flying through the canyons where Anakin was pod racing in 1999 as well. By the end of the episode, I was just stunned. It was great Star Wars content, even though Boba Fett just isn't in it. By the end, Mando tells Fennec that he'll help them for free, but first he has to pay a visit to a little friend, which of course is Grogu. The last time we saw Grogu, he was leaving with Luke Skywalker to train to be a Jedi, and since this is the Book of Boba Fett, I thought that next episode would pick up with Mando going to leave but having to stay because the Pikes attack. One of the Jawas apparently stole apart from the Pike, so my speculation was that they'd attack Pelimoto's place, kill her, and force Din Djarin to stay and fight. With only 2 episodes left, it felt like it was time to pick up the pace on Boba Fett's story. So I was wrong. Once the episode started and Din Djarin was already flying to a vibrant jungle planet, I realized, oh shit, we're actually doing this right now. Right off the bat, we get R2-D2, and it's obvious they're not going to just show us R2-D2 and then not show us Luke and Grogu. Seeing Luke's Jedi Temple being built is cool and all, but I mean, we know how it ends. So at this point, I'm preparing myself to see Luke Skywalker because if I'm being honest, I was anticipating his return more than Grogu's. We see Grogu meditating with Luke, who is played by Graham Hamilton with a deep fake to look like young Mark Hamill. It's an amazing upgrade from the previous CG face of Luke in The Mandalorian, with dead eyes, no emotion, and the overall lack of mobility. Even though I know this isn't really Mark Hamill, it still feels real. At this point, they're just flexing to us that they got it right and that it looks good this time. There's only one shot that looked goofy to me, and another where it just didn't look as convincing. The majority of this episode is spent with Luke training Grogu, and it's absolutely beautiful to witness. The parallels of him training with Yoda are obvious.
Size matters not. Look at me. Judge me by my size, do you?
He once said to me, size matters not.
Yes, run! Do. Or do not. There is no try.
You're trying too hard. Don't try. Do.
And the scene above the treetops with the Force theme playing actually moved me to tears. Don't even get me started on Ahsoka showing up, because once she did, I realized this meant that she and Luke have met before, and I knew Dave Filoni would give us a reference to Anakin.
So much like your father.
I never expected to see an Order 66 flashback from Grogu's perspective, but that's Dave Filoni for you. And now, until it's finally revealed, fans will endlessly debate who saved Grogu from the Jedi Temple. It was emotionally compelling to see Mando's internal struggle as he has to cope with the fact that it is in Grogu's best interest that he doesn't go see him, as it will make training and letting go harder. This is the beauty of subtlety, because Mando wears a helmet, so we can't see his face while he's struggling with this conflict. All we can do is imagine the pain that he's feeling inside as he comes to terms with the fact that he shouldn't go up that hill and see Grogu, that he should leave, and that he might not ever see him again. Once Mando left, I felt ready to join Boba's story again, not even realizing that we spent nearly 3/4 of the episode with Luke and Grogu. While he wasn't even in the last episode, at least Boba Fett appears in this one, for one scene that is. He doesn't even speak at all, but hey, I complained earlier that he spoke too much, so whatever. This episode also saw the return of Cobb Vanth, which is always welcome, and I think he fits naturally into Boba Fett's story because, for one, he's on Tatooine, and two, Boba Fett already knows who he is based on his dialogue from The Mandalorian. While Luke and Ahsoka's return were unexpected, this episode gave us a character that I think we all saw coming. This episode saw Cad Bane, the notorious bounty hunter from the Clone Wars and the Bad Batch, make his live-action debut. He's still voiced by Corey Burton, which is iconic, and the performance artist was very lanky and made Cad Bane feel real. People were bickering over Cad Bane's face shape, mouth placement, and skin color, but I'm beyond that now, and I've just fully accepted that this is Cad Bane in live action. Who knows where the hell he even parked his ship, but I can't blame the man for wanting to make a cool entrance, and make an entrance he did. The episode ended with Luke giving Grogu a choice to either choose the chainmail shirt and go back to Mando, or to choose Yoda's lightsaber and stay and become a Jedi. It was cool fan service to see Yoda's lightsaber again, but I immediately wondered how Luke got it since it was destroyed, but clearly they don't care to retcon canon comics. With how this episode ended, I thought this felt like Mandalorian Season 3, and I want to talk about that. This show is called The Book of Boba Fett, and it consists of only 7 episodes. 4 of these 7 episodes contain either a majority of flashbacks or a hefty chunk of flashbacks, and one of these 7 episodes doesn't even have Boba Fett in it, and now this episode gives him what I can only describe as a cameo in his own show. And after that, we're left with the finale. The best episodes of the Book of Boba Fett don't even have Boba Fett in them, and that says a lot. Sure, Boba Fett stole some spotlight and the attention of fans when he showed up in The Mandalorian, but the show stood just fine on its own, and wasn't struggling to captivate an audience or justify its existence and story. But in this show, The Mandalorian shows up and completely steals the spotlight from Boba Fett, because let's be honest, the story that they're trying to tell for Boba in the present day is just not interesting at all. Nothing in the show thus far is that interesting, and casual audiences especially are far more invested in Mando's journey with Grogu. The truth is that Din Djarin is the modern day Boba Fett. Cold, quiet, and lethal, Din Djarin embodied the image of what fans saw in Boba Fett during Season 1 of The Mandalorian. But now, the real Boba Fett is back, so what do you do with him? In my opinion, I don't think the writers know what they want to do with him. He's no longer quiet, reserved, menacing, cold-blooded, and savage like he was in the expanded universe or in the canon comics. Now he's openly loud, honorable, soft, and respectful. Like I said, that's a fine arc, and they had plenty of potential to tell it well, and they almost did. But then they opted instead to give us The Mandalorian Season 2.5. Seeing Luke and Grogu and Ahsoka was amazing, and I'm not saying that I don't love it, but I didn't need this in the Book of Boba Fett, because I never thought it would be here in the first place. I thought it'd be in The Mandalorian Season 3. The Mandalorian is so successful that it's causing Boba Fett to suffer, because Mando is arguably the more interesting character with clear motivations and drive. We're just told that Boba Fett wants to run a crime family, but why? He's done with bounty hunting and wants to move beyond that, and he wants Fennec to help him make their claim, but that's not much of a motivation beyond, hey, I want to do this thing, we should do this thing. Anyways, this episode set up a lot of expectations going into the finale for a lot of people, including myself. To me, it feels like they know which stuff is more interesting, which characters and which storylines, so they'll deviate from Boba Fett's story in his own show, and they'll sideline him, and to me, that just doesn't work. I mean, it did, cause like, this is cool as shit, but we didn't need this. I never expected to see it, so if I didn't get it, I wouldn't have ever complained. As you could have guessed, I wasn't all that impressed with the finale. Once the credits rolled and I watched the end credits scene, I had to ask myself if my feelings on it were clouded by the WandaVision effect, and to that I say no. Even though characters that I thought would show up didn't show up, this finale still felt underwhelming. It's not the worst thing in this series, because nothing will beat the 3rd episode in terms of poor quality, but this is what happens when you cram the 3rd act of a series into one final episode. Sure, it's an hour long, but there's still only so much you can do when you have one episode left and the past 2 episodes had nothing to do with Boba Fett. When the X-Wing headed down to Tatooine, I thought we might see Luke Skywalker set foot on the sand of Tatooine for the first time since 1983, but no, Luke isn't in the X-Wing, it's just Grogu and R2 is flying the ship. The X-Wing docks in Peli Motto's hangar, and sure, the scene is cute, but you're telling me that Luke, I will give my life to protect the child Skywalker, just sent the kid in a ship by himself across space to Tatooine when he had no idea where Din Djarin actually was. Thank God they docked in the hangar that belonged to the one person on Tatooine that's not a total psychopath and adores Grogu just as much as the audience does. But because this episode is back to focusing on Boba Fett, finally, that means we are also stuck with characters that suck, such as the Inspector Gadget kids and this Twi'lek who is never named and is only credited as Mayor Mukshai's major domo. At one point, Finnick is literally just reading the screenplay aloud to tell the audience where everyone is and what they're doing, and it doesn't sound natural at all. We get confirmation that the Pikes actually killed Boba's Tusken tribe, which I had suspected all along, but I think that was a real missed opportunity here. They could have had it revealed that Cad Bane killed them specifically. This would raise the stakes even more in the coming scenes and create even greater tension beyond the history that they already have together. The small tease of Boba Fett versus Cad Bane is fine until shortly after the mayor's major domo suggests that he could negotiate on behalf of Boba Fett to the Pikes. So Boba Fett writes his offer on a tablet and he goes out to give them the offer. The offer ends up being nothing, followed by a threat to kill them all, and once again they miss the chance to make the Pikes a more believable threat. I thought they were going to open fire as soon as he walked out, but they especially should have murked his ass as soon as he read aloud Boba's offer. But this is where we get a cool action sequence with Din and Boba using their jetpacks and blasting away at the Pikes. Boba Fett hasn't fired his EE-3 blaster rifle since he shot Bib Fortuna's fat ass in the finale of The Mandalorian Season 2. 7 episodes into his own show and he's finally shooting his blaster. Need I say more? The rest of this action sucks. These giant upgraded droidicas look rather strange for Star Wars, and Robert Rodriguez keeps doing these slow-mo moments in his action sequences that just pull me out. Most of the action is just running away from these giant robots in a straight line and still not getting hit, or ducking behind cover and popping up in intervals to shoot at the bad guys. It's not captivating and it's really dull. And I just hope and pray to God that Robert Rodriguez does not direct Star Wars ever again. Let him stick to Shark Boy and Lava Girl because he just does not fit in this franchise. Look at this scene and tell me why it made the final cut, because I really don't understand. I'm sure this seemed way cooler in Rodriguez's head. Also, his directing in this episode is dog shit. The lighting in some of these shots are ass and looks cheap as hell. Episode 2 was made for HBO. This was made for CW. The cinematography is bland. It's nothing special. Some of this lighting and camera work makes Cad Bane look like an action figure being moved with stop-motion animation. This may be an unpopular opinion among fans who just hate anything in Star Wars that is lighthearted in nature, but I actually like Peli Motto. She shows up midway through the fight when she's trying to find Mando and has no idea what's going on, and this scene is actually pretty funny to me. Plus, it's got some fan service here, because this carriage that they're riding on is the same one Anakin and Padme rode in Attack of the Clones.
Okay.
Here we get the one emotional beat in this episode when Grogu leaps into Mando's arms and they embrace once more. This is very touching and it's nice to see them back together, but for me, that charm and emotion is only in the moment. Once it's over, I start to truly believe that this was a mistake. The finale of The Mandalorian Season 2 was so emotional and left a lot of people in tears. It was the completion of Mando's journey. He rescued the child, he searched for his kind, he protected him, and then he reunited him with his kind. Now, Grogu is going off with Luke Skywalker and to train to be a Jedi, while Mando goes back to bounty hunting or joins Bo-Katan in her campaign to reclaim Mandalore, especially now that he has the Darksaber. That finale no longer feels like it has any weight to it, because literally 2 episodes later in Mando's story, they're reunited. Grogu just chose to go back to him and Luke let him. To me, it feels like Disney and Lucasfilm know that Grogu is a selling point for most casual audiences. His merchandise does the best numbers and people tune in to watch The Mandalorian because he's in it. This feels like a cheap cash-in on Grogu's popularity, and it will be especially weird for casual audiences who didn't watch the Book of Boba Fett to start The Mandalorian Season 3 and see that Grogu and Mando are back together. Again, all of this is nice to see, but it feels like it has completely undermined the ending of Season 2 of The Mandalorian. It's no longer as impactful because he just leaves Luke and goes back to Mando. As was expected, Boba Fett does ride the Rancor in this finale, even though we've never seen him practice or train with it, but maybe he just did it off screen? I mean, it's possible since we haven't seen him for 2 episodes, but everything we've seen in the show thus far in the present day happens over the span of just a couple days. Yes, this is cool as shit, but it doesn't feel earned. That's what a lot of this show feels like. When there's cool stuff happening, it doesn't feel earned. At last, we finally get a face-off between Boba Fett and Cad Bane. When Cad Bane started talking about how long he's known him, I genuinely thought we were gonna get a flashback to a young Boba Fett dueling Cad Bane like in the unfinished Clone Wars arc, where Boba got his helmet dent and Cad Bane got his metal plate on his head, which we saw in the Bad Batch and in this show too. Cad Bane is 71 years old in this show, and Boba Fett even remarks on his old age. But nonetheless, he's no match for the quick draw of space Clint Eastwood. I will admit that seeing Boba Fett use his training from the Tuskens to best Cad Bane, a very old adversary, was cool. But then Cad Bane says, "I always knew you were a killer," before Boba just fucking impales him. That's it. Cad Bane is dead. They brought him into live action and then killed him off immediately, just like that. Cad Bane telling Boba Fett, "Oh, I knew you were a killer," is just weird because I can't recall Boba Fett ever claiming that he wasn't a killer. His other lines on Boba Fett's history are just odd too, like when he told Cobb Vanth that Boba Fett is a cold-blooded killer who worked with the Empire. Like, okay. And he says that like he hasn't also murdered a shit ton of people himself and worked for the scummiest of the scum in the galaxy. He's a bounty hunter too, and apparently a hypocrite. So that's a wrap on Cad Bane's story, and needless to say, I am disappointed and somewhat shocked that they actually killed him off like that. Yes, he's really old here, and that means we have just under 30 years worth of potential stories to tell for Cad Bane, but if there's one thing I'm getting tired of in Star Wars, it's killing off characters in one property and then making a prequel property where that character gets more to do. Sure, it's often pretty cool to see, but there's no real tension because we know when they're going to die. Like, I'm sure that Andor will be a really interesting spy thriller, but we know that Cassian can't die in his own show because he dies in the only other property that he's in. When the Pikes are shown to be convening on their plans to leave Tatooine, I was anticipating a hologram call and a reveal that Kira was pulling the strings. If you're reading the comics, you know why this would make sense. But no, these loose ends are tied up rather quickly as Finnick just quickly kills everyone in the room and then even hangs the mayor. It happens so fast and it's not even satisfying. Like, okay, so wiping out the head of the antagonistic force was that simple all along. The Pike Syndicate is fucking huge, and this is not even a war. It's a small little battle in a town, and the Pikes just leave. Like I said, lots of stuff in this show doesn't feel earned or just doesn't even pay off. This entire show tried to convince us that Boba Fett wants to run a gotcha on Tatooine and be a leader, but by the end of the show, he literally says he doesn't know if he's cut out for it. Also, I really hope they don't make Chrysanthemum like a lovable guy. Yeah, he's cool to watch on screen, but he is nothing at all like Chewbacca. He is ruthless and absolutely savage. And if you've read the comics, you'd understand. Even Garsa's monologue about his conquests and victories gives you an idea of the kind of stuff he's done in the past. Also, can I just say this is the most underwhelming post-credit scene I've ever seen. We saw Cobb Vanth get shot in the shoulder, which we know wouldn't kill someone since blaster shots cauterize wounds. His townsfolk may have played it off like he was murdered by Bane, but we saw him get shot in the shoulder. So it's just not a really cool moment when we get confirmation that yeah, he's alive and in a Bacta tank with Thundercat ready to operate on him. So that is the Book of Boba Fett. It's 7 episodes and overall it is a mess if you ask me. This show is supposed to be about Boba Fett, but it suffers from the success of the Mandalorian being a more intriguing and popular character, and thus he steals the show. The coolest moments in the show, like Luke training with Grogu, Ahsoka, and Mando's Mando business, feel like it should have been saved for The Mandalorian Season 3. And like I said, the finale of The Mandalorian Season 2 now feels meaningless now that Grogu is right back into Mando's care. Yes, this is adorable, and yes, I'm happy to see this, but I can still criticize it for what it's doing to the narrative. I don't know if we'll get a Season 2 for this series, and personally I don't give a shit, because I'm sure they have no problem shoehorning in a Boba Fett storyline into The Mandalorians moving forward. I guess that would be fair, but what do I know? Overall, I would say that I am disappointed to say that this series was a letdown for me, and it could have been a lot better than what it was. This show has been rightfully dubbed the Book of Everyone But Boba Fett, and it's not hard to see why. Also, real quick, Lucasfilm, if you're watching this by chance, please, dear God, do not let Robert Rodriguez direct Star Wars again, and instead give Bryce Dallas Howard more shit to direct with increased budgets. Hell, give her her own movie. Obi-Wan Kenobi was just announced to be releasing May 25th of this year, and I could not be more excited. Even this show being a letdown cannot squash my excitement for the Kenobi series, because I have no idea how they could fuck it up. It's the one thing that every Star Wars fan wants. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this kind of content, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for future videos. As you can see from my channel, I don't have a consistent upload schedule, but I think I might start doing commentaries on Marvel shows and just try to make more content in general. I'm Remnacor, I'll see you all next time.